We are joined once again in the studio by our political advertising and campaigns expert, Benedict Pringle. Welcome, Benedict.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So, this has sort of been taken over by, obviously, the events, the terror events. And it sounds a crass way of phrasing it, perhaps, but the two political leaders of the main parties have kind of embraced that, haven't they, as their big theme building up to the election.
As you say, it's always tricky to discuss the electoral ramifications of these things without sounding a little insensitive or crass. But it's certainly true to say that they have both taken very clear positions and tried to explain to the public how each of them would go about trying to deal with things like international terror and defence. What I've found very interesting is the way that Gerry Corbin has gone about trying to remind the public that actually Theresa May has been Home Secretary for 6 years in the build-up to being Prime Minister. And so any criticism she makes of counter-terrorism or policing actually, fall fairly squarely at her door. He's also done a very interesting ploy where he has tried to link the relationship that the British government have had with arms dealers and regimes like Saudi Arabia, who are accused of sponsoring organisations like ISIS. So he has taken an area of discourse on which he is seen as very strong, so talking about shady relationships between government and arms deals, and he's tried to make that relevant to issues like terrorism at our doorstep.
It's crazy, isn't it? Well, not crazy necessarily, but so often, every election of recent times, there's been this refrain of, well, there's no difference between the two parties anyway. Gerry Corbin is getting up now and saying things even beyond the stuff in the manifesto, such as, we will immediately stop doing business or diplomacy with states, with human rights abusers like Saudi Arabia. I mean, I'm sure lots of people will welcome that, but that's a huge thing to say, because it's, I know there's lots of people who don't feel comfortable with our relationship with Saudi Arabia. But governments of both hues, Labour governments and Tory governments alike, have maintained that, largely because it brings such huge economic and employment rewards. And you don't doubt that someone like Gerry Corbyn is going to follow through on something like this, and it will have a big impact very quickly.
Absolutely, and we're seeing the fact that Gerry Corbyn is taking on these very bold positions is great for news. People are talking about him like they were never talking about him in the months in the build-up to the general election. So he feels emboldened by taking these very strong stances.
It engages people. I mean, I started out thinking that this election would have a historically low turnout because it was too close to the last election and to the Brexit referendum and all the rest of it. But I think, it'll be interesting to see, because he is taking bold positions and because that's forcing the Conservatives to take bold positions themselves, I guess. It may well have engaged, many people who in the past have just found everything in an election campaign that comes out of a politician's mouth deadly dull.
Well, it's interesting. In 2015, after Ed Miliband lost, to many people's surprise, Gerry Corbyn's sort of fundamental pitch to the Labour Party when he was trying to become leader was, if we try and be the Conservative Party but a little bit nicer, we're always going to fail. And instead he's taken that as his brief in this general election campaign, and he's gone out to be incredibly different and make a really distinct pitch. What would be just fascinating to see is if the people that he is trying to speak to, the people who didn't bother voting in 2015 but who would have probably supported Labour had they done, or the people who were too young to vote last time but have now come of age, are those people going to turn out for him? And that is something that all of the pollsters, that's the big if, and that's why you're seeing a lot of discrepancy between the different pollsters as to what the likely result is going to be. Because if you survey all these young people and these people who didn't vote in 2015, they're saying they can't wait to get out there and vote. They're desperate to.
A lot of them said that about Brexit too, didn't they?
Well, which is the other side of the coin. And the realists are saying, now, come on, they're saying that they're going to go out and vote, but are they really?
The millennials, they tend to be unreliable. They're out eating their street food,
avocado on toast,
drinking their disgusting beers out of jam jars, and debating gender fluidity, and that takes up a lot of time. And amidst that busy schedule, they don't necessarily have time to go and tick a box. So we'll have to wait and see whether they can clear their schedules to make that vote.
Well, the interesting thing is that the Conservative Party overwhelmingly lead on people over the age of 55. And there are a lot more people in this country over the age of 55 than there are under the age of 35. And the people who are under the age of 35 historically don't vote. So if you're looking at previous elections and you're sort of taking the vote share on the basis of what's gone before, I think we are probably looking at a Conservative majority. But, you know, let's see.
Let's see, indeed. Talk to me about earned media. What does it mean?
So earned media, at its most simple, is when news organisations and people on social media are talking about your candidate or your party. So it's you could put it in another way of saying it's PR, it's news coverage. And interestingly, if you look at the United States of America, going back to the 1960s, every single presidential candidate who has got more earned media, who has more attention from the news media, has won the presidential election. And then if you look in the UK, lots of people were predicting that the Vote Leave lot would never beat the Remainers. But then, very interestingly, the Brexit campaigners dominated the news agenda and had a much, much higher share of voice than the Remainers. So if you're looking at who is getting more earned media, who's getting more news coverage, that the chances of that person or that party winning the election historically has been very, very high indeed.
Interesting stuff. What do you think, when it comes down to it, is going to be the thing, the big issue that we remember in this election? Because of course, you know, it started off, everyone thought it would be about Brexit. That didn't really materialise, that debate, in such a way as we thought it might. Then we thought it was just going to be, the Conservatives would have liked it to have been, not really issue related, but a fight between two personalities, Theresa May and Gerry Corbin. Well, that didn't work out, and they changed tack. Public services, Corbyn has wanted to put on the agenda and has had quite a lot of traction with, and of course social care. What is it really that we will look back and remember? Because really, the last election, it came down to the economy. The Labour Party wanted it to be about all sorts of other things, but really, the Conservatives won with a message about the economy, didn't they? And
isn't it amazing how little we've been talking about the economy?
Yeah.
I mean, looking at the question time events that have been happening on TV and the interviews with Andrew Neil and such like, I mean, the economy has barely had a mention, which is absolutely staggering. And the fact that the economy has been so marginal in the debate has been to the Labour Party's benefit. Similarly, with the fact that the NHS and school meals and things like that have been on the agenda, that has benefited the Labour Party hugely, because this is okay. So the top 5 issues that the country believe are important, if you look at the pollsters, are NHS is number 1, and Labour own that issue.
You know what? That's always number 1. And Labour, as far as the polls are concerned, always are way ahead of the Conservatives on the NHS. But Labour don't win every election, which makes me think people lie when they're asked about what influences their vote.
But then you've also got to look at the other top issues. So the other 4 are Brexit, the economy, security, and immigration. And the Conservative Party dominates all those 4 issues way above the dominance that the Labour Party have on the NHS. And then you've also got to look at leadership. So at the start of the campaign, one of the reasons why pundits like myself was so confident that Theresa May was going to run away with it was, not only did she dominate 4 of the top 5 policy agendas, she was also seen by a massive margin to be the better leader of the 2. Now, what has been so interesting is that leadership chasm has closed significantly, and Theresa May has, from the start of the campaign, she was at 21% approval rating. now, this is as of this week, she's down on 5%. So a real drop off a cliff for Theresa May's leadership approval.
A lot of people suggesting that no matter what the result, unless she really does deliver the landslide that people once thought she would, she has done herself a lot of damage within her own party. And people, even if she remains as Prime Minister after Thursday, there will be those in her party who'll be looking at her thinking, I'm not sure we want to go into another election with her at the helm because she hasn't done a fantastic job this time.
Well, I think you're getting ahead of yourself with the next election. I mean, let's talk about the next month when Brexit negotiations start. You're talking about a Prime Minister who has been the first party leader in history to U-turn on a manifesto pledge, and has then also ducked debating the leader of the opposition, who she claims isn't up to it. Well, if he's not up to it, then why didn't she debate him? So in negotiations, which is all about mental toughness, agility, ploughing forward.
Do you think she's collapsed?
It's been a total collapse.
Do you think that she's mentally collapsed on the campaign trail? Do you think she hasn't been able to take the pressure?
I don't know what's gone on, but I think everything seems to have fallen away from her after the first couple of weeks. She really hasn't had a good run ever since the manifestos came out, and she's had this big challenge on social care and school dinners. Seen those two things really cut through, and suddenly, I think Theresa May's had a bad election, and Jeremy Corbyn, wow, what a great election. What's so interesting about all of this, obviously, is that, to the point that we discussed earlier, if the right people don't turn out to vote, all of this is, it doesn't matter. She could have had a terrible election if the people who didn't vote in 2015 and the young people don't turn out and vote. Theresa May is going to walk it.
Yeah. Okay, Benedict, always a pleasure. Thanks ever so much for joining us in the studio. We'll speak again soon. Okay.